Welcome back to Pivot Points. I'm your host, Dave Allen, founder of Brand Pi, the brand consultancy working with businesses to deliver impact at pivotal moments in their journey. Steinar Sønsteby has been with Atea for the better part of 2 decades, but the most pivotal step in his career meant killing his dreams to chase a new purpose. New to the sector, he went on to meet with leaders of Microsoft, IBM and Cisco, cementing the lofty ambitions of tech innovation. Over the course of his career, he's learned the art of timing the hard way, mustered up the courage to boldly step into the unknown, and rebelled against his greatest mentor, his father. This fascinating episode of Pivot Points breaks down the mindset behind one of technology's most prudent leaders. Really excited to have you here today, Steinar. Thank you very much for agreeing to participate in the podcast. Just to help our listeners understand who you are, what you do. I know you have a huge company in Scandinavia that you are the chief executive of. Could you just introduce yourself and just help our listeners to sort of orientate?
So absolutely, Dave, and thank you for inviting me and having me. I was born outside Oslo in Norway, and coming from a very small country, and even back then in the beginning of the 60s, the world was very different. I had a lot of influence in my life from my dad that, by the way, passed away some years ago. And so that was a great start to my life, very secure, a lot of good friends, a lot of sports. I was very much into sports growing up. I did too many of them, never got to be the best at anything, but I was absolutely best at doing most sports at the same time, I think.
So were you doing cross-country skiing or?
I was actually more downhill, so that became my prime sport after, some years. Of course, football, handball, athletics, swimming, you name it, I've been there.
Yeah. So how did you get to university? It doesn't sound like you had time to educate yourself if you're doing all of that.
No. So I think one of the moments that kind of changed a little bit of my life was going to military service and officer school at a young age. I've always thought back, sometimes you don't understand when you're in the moment, but looking back, I think I grew up in those 2 years in the military. It was also the first time I really understood the power of leaders and leadership. Of course, on a very ground level, being a chief of 5 or maybe 10 people in a very stressful situation, it kind of puts you on the spot.
And how old were you when you did that?
So I was 19 when I got in, and I was immature. I was a very young for my age. So I always think that I needed those 2 years. And then when I got out, my dad was an engineer by heart. I mean, really engineer. He had me pick apart and put together things from very early age. And I remember I was 16, he gave me a broken car and said, if you can pick it apart and put it together, it's yours. And I barely did it for my driver license when the day I turned 18, David. So I was the only one having a car. So I was there was no chance for me to do anything else than an engineering school. But as I said, coming from a small country has shaped me. And so one of the really early things was that I didn't want to go to school in Norway. I wanted to see the world. Germany was a possibility, UK was a possibility, but I jumped over the pond to University of Utah in Salt Lake, mostly because it's a great place to downhill, but it's also a school that are known in Norway a little bit. And so that absolutely changed my perspective on a lot of things in the world.
I mean, that's a brave thing to do. Most people stay in their own country and go to university in their own country. That would have been quite a pioneering thing back then, I would have thought.
Yeah, and it's hard to even remember how the world was,
Yeah.
No smartphones, no internet, very hard to communicate back. One of the toughest decisions actually was that my dad wanted me to go to the prime engineering school in Norway, which were free because we have free education in Norway. And so I chose to go to expensive university in the US against, my mentor and my father's advice, and had to pay for the whole thing myself. So it was not an easy thing, but it was the right thing when I look back.
Yeah, and what drove you to do that? Because that's clearly a first pivotal, really big pivotal moment to do all of that and have the strength of will to follow that through.
I still remember a little bit of the first weeks. The language was difficult. The culture was very difficult. I remember once at campus, there was a guy I was talking to, a random guy, and he said, in the end of the conversation, he said, "I'll call you," which is a polite way of ending a conversation in the US. And I stopped him and I said, "How can you do that? You don't have my phone number." It's like learning that culture are different and languages and everything. So I think actually my military service what made me confident that I could do things that I didn't think I could before. And I think that was instrumental for me to take that decision. It wasn't the easy decision, but I took it. And I think the confidence from the military service was part of that.
Mm. And so you qualified in the US. Did you think of staying in the US?
Yes. So back then in Norway, you didn't have the same degrees like bachelor and master's. So you had a little bit of, so I took my bachelor and then I had to build on halfway to master's to get to a Norwegian certified degree, or a degree I could also certify in Norway. And so I went back that summer before the last quarter, so to speak, the last half year. And I was 100% sure I would stay in the US and that I would go back that summer, finish school, and then start working. And I was intrigued about university. So I thought my first job would actually be as a, assistant to a professor at the university or something like that. But that summer, when I was back in Norway, that changed that choices because I got a great job waiting for me in Norway. And I wasn't applying for it. There was some people reaching out to me. So where I could combine engineering and computers, which I had barely started using at university, but very few people in Norway had even touched at that time. So I thought I can't say no to this. And so I ended up going back and not staying, but that was a little bit against the plan.
Yeah. And so, getting into computing and engineering at that age and at that time must have been really exciting because the market would have been lifting off. The growth must have been electrifying. And what did it feel like as a young man going into that industry? What year are we talking about here, sort of?
Yeah, so I came back and started working in Norway in 1987, and I started as an engineer. Back then, Norway had found oil, like UK, oil and gas in the North Sea. That was the place to be. That was where young people wanted to go in. And as I said, I got a great job. And very early, they started saying, you're the US guy, you know everything about computers. I really didn't, but I had to learn very quickly. So for the first year and a half, I was actually creating a lot of networking and friends in the computer industry, which were, early days in the late 80s. And that eventually led me to the biggest step in my life, career-wise, to actually give up my job in engineering that kind of had shaped my dreams and my life until then, and start with a friend that had just started an IT company. But I started up, I think I was number 3 or 4 employee. And I ended up being the CEO about 4 years later of that company, and IPO'd it and made some money. And, it just drove me into the IT business. But it's, as you said, it was a booming, very entrepreneurial, very fun I met a lot of the people who are leaders of the big companies like Microsoft and Dell and Cisco and IBM back then. And so it is the most pivotal, and again, for the second time in my life, very hard against my dad's advice.
I mean, that's strength of character, isn't it? If you've got a respected mentor, a good mentor will also let you have your head and let you make your own mistakes. And it sounds like in both instances, it was the right thing to do. And your dad would have learned.
Yeah. And I remember him speaking about that the last time I spoke to him when he was in the hospital before he died. And his last words, before I left his bed and, later that afternoon he passed away, was, "You did okay after all, my son."
That's the best you ever get, isn't it?
That was the best he could,
Yeah, that's the best you ever get. But let's go back to starting that company. I mean, that sounds like a really exciting thing to do. Were you the self-belief at that time that carried you? Because lots of people I meet say, I want to start a company, and then very few actually do.
Yeah. So again, it was started. So I didn't start it, but it was very small. I mean, it was very small. And the guy that had started it and recruited me was a person that I spoke to and asked for help when I was the engineering guy that should know everything about computers. So actually it was him knowing everything about computers. And so I was more the engineer that could structure things. And so I was building the technical side of the company. And very quickly, we got to about 120 people. We were learning the hard way. And there weren't really that many computer companies around at that time. And the American companies had no employees in Europe. So we needed to go to the US, and speak to people. Communication was totally different back then. There was no internet, as I said. And so I learned a whole bit about a lot of things, including myself. I felt I was not doing anything else than working at that time. I even had a sleeping bag in my office. But we just went from success to success. And in 1993, we took the company public.
And where did that go after that? Did you stay with the company or did you decide to move on?
No, so I stayed for, I think it was 3 years or 2.5 years. And then I was asked to go to, a little bigger, but still small company. I think about 250, 300 people that was only in Norway, but wanted to go outside Norway. And that is the company I'm the CEO of today. It's just under a different name, but same company. So eventually I've been with Atea for, 27, 28 years, but, and now we're almost 10,000 people. Back then we were about 250 people and only in Norway. Now we're, many places in Europe, 8 different countries. So a long journey, but yeah, I was asked to come and take over as COO back then and run Norway while some other people were looking outside Norway.
Mm. And for those people that don't know Atea, maybe just a quick explanation of, 10,000 people is a lot of people.
Yeah, it is. Well, the actual name actually has a meaning. It's Latin and means the spider in the network. And that was, what the company was doing, building networks. And so today we are, the biggest partner for companies like IBM, Microsoft, Dell, HP, Lenovo, Apple, and others. So we build infrastructure. We can also run the infrastructure for you. So we're a managed service provider. And we're also the biggest consulting company on IT in the Nordic and Baltic area. We're approximately $6 billion in revenue this year. We're publicly traded and have been for a long time. And so I've been fighting with the public finance arena for my whole life almost. So, since I took the other company public in 1993, it's now, oh gosh, almost 30 or more than 30 years on the stock exchange.
And when you took over as CEO, what were the sort of learnings that you got in the first sort of 90 days? I've had conversations with people who've been in a leadership role, but not in the CEO role. And they suddenly realize that there's a huge difference when the buck actually totally stops with you. And it's a very different experience. It would be really interesting to get your perspective of that transition from a leadership role to the leadership role.
I have this conversation sometimes with people that we are giving new positions internally, because it doesn't only happen when you take the step into the role as CEO. We are organized in countries. So, when someone are promoted to become a country leader, country manager, some of that actually happens because you're not by yourself, but you're more by yourself. You're more lonely. But back to your question, Dave, it's a huge difference to be the one or be one of the ones. It's lonely. It's a lot of commitment of time and effort. It's not for everybody. And, I give it my all. I've given my life. I'm 63 years old now. I've been half my life doing this. And it's so much fun, but the responsibility never leaves. It's 24/7. And I think that is a huge difference. I sometimes try to describe it to myself as I have to remember I am one mountain further on my walk in the mountains. In Norway, we walk in the mountains a lot. And so I see and feel and know a little bit more all the time. And that is what I think puts the pressure on you.
Yeah. And did you, presumably in your previous role, you were in the business, and then suddenly as CEO, you have to be on the business. You have to be on that next mountain, and you have to be seeing what's past that mountain. Freeing up the time to actually do that can be quite a challenge because everybody wants your time and everybody wants your approval of a decision. And, one of the interviews I did a while back was with the CEO of United Airlines. And I put to him that a good chief executive probably needs to make about 3 big decisions every year. And then you do 60 little ones every day. But it's the 3 big ones where you really do make the difference. Does that sort of resonate with yourself?
Yeah, it might be 4 or 5, but I get your point and I agree. Yeah. And I have learned during the last 15 years as CEO in this job that I need to spend some time by myself. I know people are different, Dave. I might not be like everybody else, but I need some time by myself. And that time, if it's spent out in the nature, or outdoor, I get the most benefit from that time by myself. So cross-country skiing or running, walking in the mountains. We're fortunate enough to have a place in the mountains in Norway. Or just, I picked up biking 20 years ago, road biking. And can't daydream when you're on the bike because you're in traffic. So you need to keep your mind on what you're doing, but you can also kind of process something. So that is how I work on the big decisions. I try not to rush myself. I try to take and use time as a friend, not an enemy, and gather information, speak to people, prepare them for my decision in a way, but mostly just be very sure that I get it right. And of course, you're not getting everything right, but the big ones you need to get right enough.
Yeah. No, and the big decisions, investing in cloud, investing in AI, those are huge decisions for an organization like yours. And We worked with Capgemini years ago when they were transitioning from legacy computing systems and network computing systems to cloud. And it was a huge transformation for that organization. I think they had about 160,000 employees at the time. And people don't understand necessarily the stresses and strains of leadership when you're guiding people who've done something for 30, 40 years one way, and now there's a really major technological shift, and we've got to change the way we think. How do you go about that in an organization like yours?
So I often tell my people that timing is one of the more difficult decisions I take. So when rather than what. I feel that when you have the amount of people that we have, and I remember as an example, not too long ago, most people didn't really know about AI. It's been more of a science fiction for most people. Of course, in our industry, and you also know very well, Dave, that it's been around for a long time, but not accessible to people like ChatGPT kind of envisioned. What is it now, 3 years ago? Or almost 3 years ago. And so when that happened, everybody in our company was like, we need to go massively into AI. We need to do this and we need to do that and reskill hundreds or if not thousands of people. And I was working with Microsoft and IBM to try to figure, of course we would go into AI. We already kind of started, but I was working with them when is the time to go from 10 to 100 consultants, and when is it right to go from 100 internal licenses to free licenses for everybody because we need to use the medicine ourselves. And those kind of timing questions, I have been fortunate enough to have contact with the biggest leaders of our industry since we grew up in this industry. So I am so thankful for the friendship/business friendship that I have with the biggest brains in the industry and maybe in some sense in the world. So I rely a lot on discussions with smarter people than myself. But timing is difficult. And that is where I spend the most time.
That's really interesting because I think you're the first person I've talked to that's brought up, effectively timing is everything. The idea is there. And how do you go about evaluating this is the right time to make the move? I'm now going to spend the X million dollars making that investment. I'm now going to tell our employees we're going to move forward. It's a big strategic decision timing and getting the timing right. Is it a sixth sense?
I can say that I've made my share of mistakes. I can't remember right now where I did a mistake where it was to move too late. I have moved too early. I've let myself be pushed to move too early and spend a lot of money without any return because the market wasn't there or the technology wasn't, we're not a company that can rely on one project. We have 25,000 customers that paid a bill to us last year. And so we need to have hundreds of customers be ready, so to speak, or be interested at least. So my mistakes have very often been to listen to the wrong people and go early or too early. If you're about to go late, you're getting those signals more and more urgently, and you can always catch up a little bit. To be very late, when I have looked at it, at least from where I sit, not that we have been, but people around us. It's not because they're late. It's because they've taken a different decision. They've taken a decision not to go there. The Kodak moment type of thing. It's not because they were a month late, or 3 months late, because you can always catch up. So that's why I said, use time as a friend. Don't let you be pushed into something you're not comfortable with, that you haven't thought through. If you're late, spend time and money to catch up.
Yeah, because it requires a great deal of nerve and holding your nerve. AI at the moment is probably a very good example where it feels to me a bit like the Wild West, and everybody is trying to figure out how to monetize it. And there's a number of growing examples of businesses, but everybody, if you look at every major technology firm, AI is all over their homepage. We are experts at it. But, unless P&G and Unilever and the big corporations are actually spending large sums of money, actually putting AI into everything that they do, and they might not be ready for it yet, they might be well advanced. If the market's not there, holding your nerve and knowing when to make that move is a really powerful leadership skill. I can see that.
Yeah, and as with a lot of technology shifts, Dave, this is not black and white, because it's not like everybody's not using it and then suddenly everybody are using it.
Yeah.
So it's the same thing. I remember many, many years ago, longer back than what people think, we were debating how we thought public cloud would develop. And, being in the region that we are with a lot of public customers, we thought that public cloud in the Nordics would move very different than what people said it would. And I said many, many years ago, it was my quote, but I said to the financial market that public cloud is not a destination. It's a resource. It's not going to be so that everybody moves from not using public cloud to put everything in the public cloud. And here we are, 15, 16, 17 years later, and still 85% of all data sits locally. We think that everything is in the public cloud, but it's not even close. And it's the same thing, I think, with AI. A lot of people talk as if everybody are champions and utilizing AI today. Most enterprises are not. They're testing a little bit, yeah, but that is a different thing. They're not relying on it.
Yeah. No, I think Accenture, it's something like only 30% of employees have full access to Chat GPT-4. So if you can't play with the new technology, it's going to be very hard to take everybody with you. And how do you sort of think about that when you're bringing new technology into your own firm? Because you must be quite clever users of technology, I would have thought.
I hope so. Being an engineer, a little bit back in time, I was actually diving into it with some of the nerdiest people in the company. I'm still trying a little bit. I had a 2-hour session on with some Swedes yesterday, actually, on what we did with building a local AI data center for public customers in Sweden. And I was like, how is it built? And the guy was, didn't know me that well. He's only been with us for about 8 to 12 months. And he was like, are you sure that I should go that deep? And I said, well, you'll lose me at some stage, but I'll tell you when. And we went on for an hour, and then I said, hey, I'm lost here now.
Yeah.
So I like to understand, and then I can push people. But we absolutely use the technology internally, and I guess we could have spent less money on our own IT, on our own labs, on our own data centers if we were only going for efficiency. But we are not. We are also having to learn and use things. So often we build 2 or 3 parallel processes or infrastructures or whatever. We're testing both IBM and Microsoft and AI. We're testing a lot of different security vendors and solutions. But there's a lot of different technologies out there, and we can't be best at all.
And I mean, one of the things I'd love to just sort of finish with and get your sort of perspective on is managing a culture in a fast-moving technology firm, and how important are your people to you, and how do you keep that interaction between humans and the technology moving in a positive, engaging, inspiring type of way? Because you must be moving at pace as a business, and keeping people with you, I'm sure, is harder than in other sort of businesses that maybe aren't changing so fast.
I am so lucky that I am in the industry I am, and I'm trying to remind me as often as I can, because it is challenging, but it's so much fun. And when I started in the IT industry, most people, including my dad, said it's not the future. Now I can't go to a party, I can't go to a restaurant, I can't go to a bar without having people want me to explain this or that. It is a fast-moving industry. You're touching on culture, Dave. It's very close to my heart. I think my employees, if you would say, could you mention one word that would describe Steinar, or they would say culture. I absolutely believe in the best of everybody. And I believe that if I had to tell you how to do things, you're not your best version of yourself. I can join, I can sometimes set direction, I can give you my opinion, but we have hired you, and there is a reason for that. So I believe in freedom and autonomy at work. The vision of Atea is to create the place to be. The place to be for smart people, for everybody and I call it a membership. You're a member of the place to be. You're not employed. And you might at some stage have a different employer, but you are still a member of the place to be. And I even have it tattooed on the top of my heart, Dave. So I'm not going to take my shirt off here, but
you really have it tattooed.
I really have it tattooed on my chest, outside my heart. It's my life, Dave. It's not. I remember once I did that 3 years ago, and just a year later was a guy coming up to me and said, "Have you really tattooed Atea on your chest?" And I said, "No, of course not. That is the name of a company. That's a logo. I've tattooed my mission, my sense of leadership, and my view on how to build a company. That's what I've tattooed, and it will be with me for the rest of my life, and I'm very proud of it." I did it before we gathered all the people in Norway. We were at that time, I think, 6,500 people 3 years ago, and that was the occasion. And I kind of opened my shirt and I showed it, and I get emotional just talking about it. But the whole audience stood up and clapped for minutes. And we're doing this every 3 years. So the 6th of September, I'm giving my keynote again in front of 9,000 people. And the expectations is that there's going to be another tattoo. But I don't know. We'll see.
It's hard to beat that one. I've watched some of your videos, and you seem to have an incredible amount of human energy coming from your employees in those sessions. And that takes some skill to do that. And, just getting that type of love is impressive. You're doing it naturally by the sound of it. Is that natural leadership coming to the fore and leading by example? Not that everybody needs to get it tattooed on their heart, but that is mind-blowing.
Yeah. No, I just I think 3 months after this event, there was a lot of partner people there too. And someone in Dell had told Michael Dell, and I met with Michael Dell in Austin, had lunch with him. And he said, late in the lunch, he said, "I've been trying not to ask this question for the whole lunch, but I have to. Can you show me the tattoo? Is it true?" And I said, "It's absolutely true. And yes, sir, you can see it." And he just shook his head. And I said, "Well, you're the next one, Michael. You have to do the same thing." And he got out of it by saying, "I have my name on the building. That should be enough."
Yeah, that's not the same.
It's not the same. I agree.
No, that's definitely not the same. It's been absolutely magic talking to you, Steinar. Absolutely, absolutely awesome. And we always finish this sort of podcast with a little bit of fun. And, I know you're an avid sort of cyclist, and I just wondered whether there's any sort of cycling feats along with your tattooing that, or any moments in your cycling that you sort of want to share that will make people smile.
Yeah, as I guess you and the listeners have understood, I tend to do different things to get my communication, my points across. And so many years ago, when as I said, I like being outdoor, we started a biking club, and it ended up being 1/3 of the employees that were, catching on to biking. Very different levels, very different activity or number of days or miles or whatever. And so when I turned 50, which now is 13 years ago, believe it or not, they challenged me in the form of a 50-year birthday gift, a start number in what's supposed to be the toughest amateur bike race, street bike race in Europe, which is the King stage at the Tour de France. And it's a different stage or different race every year. And you have to have a full medical to be able to join. And, it's a big thing. And so I took two of the bigger bikers in the company, and we went three guys, 4 mountains. And if you're into biking, Tour de France is just showing as we're speaking. And that year, it was a 12.5-hour max time limit, and we did it in 12:15. We timed it, but I can tell you, Dave, I've never, ever been so cold, so tired, and so pissed as I were on the top of Col de Tourmalet, almost 2,200 climbing meters, and that was the 3rd out of 4 mountains. But we finished, all the 3 together. And I went back to the company and I said, I'll remember this. I'll remember it for the rest of my life. I'm going to find something to challenge all of you. But when you do these kind of things, it takes on a different life because everybody was following it. And the day after, I was actually in the car of Norwegian television following the same stage, because that is the whole thing, the day after. And so when I was biking up the mountains, all the spectators are there because the roads are closed 24 hours before. So they were all there partying and cheering, and you felt like you were flying. And so people were actually watching the day after. I was in Tour de France in the commentator car, and I could, I know that hill, I know that bump, I hate that hill. It's like... But it was a lot of fun. And of course, now, many years later, I only remember the good things about it.
Yeah. The satisfaction of the pain goes away as soon as you've succeeded. And that's a great, probably, thought to end on. It's been fantastic talking to you, and congratulations on a stellar career. And I think I'm going to be dining out on your tattoo for quite a while.
I'm going to call back on you and give you some challenges, Dave, on that.
Oh, gosh. I love it. All right. Thank you so much, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Pivot Points. If you enjoyed this episode, you can find more fascinating conversations with industry leaders in our previous episodes. You'll find us wherever you get your podcasts. And if you want to know more about Brand Pi and how we deliver impact in the pivotal moments that matter to you, head over to brandpi.com. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.